Hello, my name is Akshay. I'm from Mittlearn Technologies and I would be your tutor for the game design course in Unity. In this class, we would be understanding what is the inspector window and exploring the user interface in Unity. Okay, so last time हमारी क्लास में हमने बात की थी what is the hierarchy window and what is the project window and how to navigate in Unity. So let's start by understanding what is the inspector window in Unity and seeing everything that is inside the inspector window. So the inspector window is the properties tab of the 3D object that is on our screen right now. जैसे अभी हमारा cube selected है, so it is showing every properties that is of the cube. So like everything that the cube has, the properties, जैसे transform दिख रहा है हमें and position, rotation, scale, एंड अगर हम एक कैमरा बनाते हैं तो कैमरा की सारे प्रॉपर्टीज़ दिखेंगे हमें. सो इंस्पेक्टर विंडो हर 3D ऑब्जेक्ट का प्रॉपर्टीज शोकेस करता है. So we'll go through all the basic properties that we will be using in Unity जो इंस्पेक्टर विंडो हमेशा प्रोवाइड करता है. जैसे अभी ये मेरा क्यूब सेलेक्टेड है, सो इस क्यूब में मैं देखूंगा तो सबसे पहली चीज़ आएगी मेरी ट्रांसफॉर्म. एंड ट्रांसफॉर्म से पहले आईडी टैग भी मिलता है मुझे. आईडी टैग बेसिकली आइडेंटिफाई करने के लिए यूज़ होता है फॉर लाइक द 3D ऑब्जेक्ट दैट वी हैव. सो इट्स यूज्ड फॉर ऑर्गेनाइजिंग एवरीथिंग दैट वी हैव इन आवर हायरार्की टैब. सो लाइक यहाँ से आप उसका नेम चेंज कर सकते हैं. एंड अगर मैं इसमें अभी प्लेयर लिखता हूँ, सो अब जब प्लेयर मेरा चेंज होगा तो वो हायरार्की टैब में भी चेंज हो जाएगा. So we can also use our hierarchy tab to change the name of the object, but ID tag helps us ID it. So अगर मैं मेरे hierarchy tab में जाऊँ, उस पर right click करूँ, you would get the rename option. But we will talk about the ID tag in a bit. So let's just stay on topic and talk about the inspector window. The first thing that we have on our inspector tab is our transform tab. Transform tabs helps us change the position, rotation and scale of our 3D object. So this also allows us to get the information out of the 3D object. Let's talk about the position tab first. Position tab tells us कि हमारा 3D object हमारी x axis, y axis and z axis में कहाँ पे है. So the 3D axis, the x, y, z are the three axes that we use to navigate our object in the 3D plane. So अगर मेरे रेड एरो पे मैं क्लिक करता हूँ एंड आई चेंज दी इंफॉर्मेशन देयर, आप देखेंगे कि यहाँ पे एक्स एक्सिस मेरे ट्रांसफॉर्म टैब में चेंज हो रहा है बिकॉज वी आर चेंजिंग दी पोजिशन ऑफ टू इट. अगर मैं y की चेंज करूँ तो सेम थिंग y पे भी वही चेंज होगा. एंड अगर मैं ब्लू पे चेंज करूँ तो मेरा ब्लू z एक्सिस का इंफॉर्मेशन चेंज होगा. So now let's talk about the rotation tab here. So like position tab से हम हमारे 3D object का position change कर रहे थे. And by rotation tab we can rotate the 3D object on a certain angle on our 3D plane. Like अगर मैं इसको x axis पे change करूँगा, so हमारा x axis का information change होगा. बट याद रखिएगा कि ये सिर्फ और सिर्फ रोटेशन में हेल्प करेगा. इट वोंट चेंज एनी पोजीशन ऑफ आर 3D ऑब्जेक्ट बिकॉज पोजीशन का एक अलग टैब है. सो अगर मेरे एक्स एक्सिस को मैं कॉपी करता हूँ यहाँ से, सो एंड इसे y पे भी डाल सकते हैं हम, ताकि हमें एक ही टाइप का मैनिपुलेशन दोनों साइड पे मिले. दिस विल बी हैंडी इन सम सर्टेन सिचुएशंस दैट वी वुड बी गेटिंग इनटू. सो दैट इज़ वन ऑफ द थिंग्स दैट आई वुड लाइक टू टेल यू. स्केल जो है हमारा, स्केल से हम हमारे 3D ऑब्जेक्ट को मैनिपुलेट कर सकते हैं ऑन द सर्टेन एक्सिस. मैनिपुलेट मतलब जैसे मैं उसका एक्स एक्सिस अगर चेंज करता हूँ तो इट विल स्केल ऑन द एक्स एक्सिस. वाई का चेंज करूँगा तो वाई में चेंज होगा. सो दैट इज़ हाउ वी कैन चेंज द स्केल फ्रॉम द ट्रांसफॉर्म टैब. सो लाइक अभी अगर मैं देखूँ मेरे 3D ऑब्जेक्ट को एंड ऑल द इंफॉर्मेशन दैट वी चेंज्ड, हमारा वो जो डिफ़ॉल्ट वैल्यू था that is not there anymore. So like to reset that value we would have to do something.
So for that, we can just go into the changes that we made and change it back to zero again. Or if you remember the correct thing, then we can just change that. और अगर हमें इसे totally zero पे reset करना है, we can go on the transform tab here, right click on it and then press reset. So that would help us to reset the information. Like अब वो zero zero पे आ जाएगा and जो scale रहेगा वो हमेशा one रहेगा, because अगर वो scale zero रहेगा हर axis पे, so we won't get that cube. So like scale helps us get the cube into rendering. So speaking of rendering, let's go to the next component that we have here, cube mesh filter. So cube mesh filter समझने के लिए first we would have to understand what is mesh. So mesh is the term that we use for the collection of polygons. So like every 3D object that is on our scene is made up of polygons. So the collection of polygons is called mesh, and cube mesh filter is the reference for that mesh to render. So like cube mesh filter and the mesh renderer goes hand in hand. Like अगर मेरा कोई भी एक कंपोनेंट यहाँ पे नहीं दिख रहा हो, जैसे मेरा mesh render या मेरा mesh filter, so it won't be possible for the program to actually render out the 3D object. So it is very important for both of them to be present onto the 3D object that we're seeing in the inspector window. So, but what does it do? So the mesh filter actually holds out a reference for the mesh renderer to render it out on the scene. For the basic understanding, these two aren't like that too used. This is just for the basic understanding, like a basic property है, so we won't be getting too much into it, but just for the general knowledge, that is it for these two components. So let's move on to the next component, the box collider. So this is our first physics property for the 3D object. So like हर game में 3D objects होते हैं, but how does that work with the engine? So for that we have physics engine. अगर हमारा physics engine काम नहीं करेगा, the game would be stagnant. So like the box collider is one of the most important and the first collider that we would be going over it. As of right now, we don't have anything on our scene for our box to collide with, but as for the general understanding, हम जैसे एक एंडलेस रनर बना रहे हैं, लाइक अ सबवे सर्फर टाइप ऑफ गेम. सो उसमें हमारा मेन कंपोनेंट, वन ऑफ द मेन कंपोनेंट्स दैट वी हैव फॉर लाइक लेवल डिज़ाइन इज कोलाइडिंग. जैसे अगर मेरा प्लेयर मेरे ट्रेन से कोलाइड करता है फॉर एग्जांपल, तभी हमारा गेम पॉज होता है. सो लाइक box collider is one of the most important things in the understanding of how our game works and for our level design. So like box collider के लिए ये intro अभी काफ़ी होगा. We would be having a separate episode for this. So we would be going over all of the understanding and information that we have under the box collider component. Let's just start with material, and let's understand what a material can do for our 3D object. So material is present on our inspector window as a subdivision. अगर आप देख रहे हो अपने इंस्पेक्टर विंडो पे, so on the right side, the lower right, we have this cube material. So material is a different topic than understanding whatever the components that was on the inspector tab. If you remember, we created one material in our first class and that was the cube thing. अगर मैं मेरे cube में अभी जाता हूँ, we would have that applied already. So like after clicking this arrow, this will provide us with more information on the material. Like this is the whole subsection that helps us to change everything that is on our 3D object. So basic understanding में these all like the properties that we have on our inspector window will help us to change the look and feel of our 3D object. So like हम next class में देखेंगे कि what is albedo, metallic, smoothness, normal map, and we would be understanding like how these help us to change the look of our game. Rather than just being a boring white cube, we would change it to something different, and in further classes we would even use a character. So this is it for this class. I hope you understood the inspector window because it's one of the most important things. And in the next class, we would be going over applying materials and understanding what materials is in the 3D layman language. And now that you have a basic understanding of the user interface for Unity and the tools that we would be basically using, I would suggest you go around and get familiar with it. And in the next class, we'll be talking about materials and how to apply it on our 3D object. So I'll see you in the next class.